Storm checking in. I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I've noticed myself like really digging deep into the South Node or this Gemini energy because we have inter Jupiter and Gemini. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, oh, let me get this fan. You probably hear that fan. Hold on one second. Let me move this fan out the way because it's probably loud as hell. Okay. So basically, I wanted to talk a little bit about Jupiter and Gemini transit for those that are in the South Node or have, South Node Gemini placements. For those of y'all that are checking in for the first time, my name is Crew, aka Aries Storm, your cosmic rootwork astrologer specializing in cosmic rootwork astrology, aka evolutionary astrology. And I also talk about astrocarthopgraphy here on my channel and my planetary lines and my journey and all those things. We definitely will with Gemini season talk more about astrocarthopgraphy, but I talk about my personal journeys and stuff like that. I do have courses available, personal readings, courses, resources, all that information down below. Now, the Gemini South Node dates, and I'll also talk more about evolutionary astrology on this channel because I'm being called to talk more about it instead of just the transits and placements. But one of the things as far as the dates, we have April 3rd, 1955 through October 4th, 1956. We have October 28th, 1973 to July 9th, 1975. We also have August 2nd, 1992 to February 1st, 1994. And we also have March 4th, 2011 to August 29th, 2012. We also will have in the future September 24th, 2029 through March 20th, 2031. Okay, when those transits actually come back around. Now, one thing that's come up again, because we are going through this Jupiter and Gemini transit, if you happen to be a South Node in Gemini or you happen to have this placement, I'm noticing myself like now wanting to, which I usually do anyway. I'm always been interested in like past and things that have happened, you know, in ancient times and stuff like that if you watch this channel and stuff. But for those of y'all that haven't, I've noticed myself like wanting to look up more information about my past, like my incarnations. Oops. Sorry, I have to wipe that off a little bit. Incarnations, my previous past that I've actually been through in previous lifetimes. And it's made me like really go back over some of the things that were happening in this time. And I think one of the things that were coming up for me specifically as a Gemini South Node, and tropical astrology is in my 4th house, and Vedic astrology is in my 5th house. But one of the bigger things that came up specifically tropical astrology was like my home, my family, and my roots. And so Gemini South Node, and the more that I'm reading about it, the more that I'm understanding it from my own personal experience, and the more that I've come to learn about this Gemini South Node energy, I start to see like a continuous pattern that happens here. Now, if we talk about the energy of Gemini and the North Node, or this energy being in Sagittarius, I talk a lot about Gemini energy being able to take from its immediate environment. Okay, granted, Gemini is very intelligent. It's a very intelligent sign. It's a very intellectual sign. And like I said, it's kind of always observing and taking things from its environment, its place of resonance. Also, too, we have to understand and think about Gemini again as this entity that is the first air. It's the way we first intellectually understand symbols, signs, communication. And where do we get this from when it comes to Geminian energy? If we're talking about the first 6 houses, or the first 6 signs, which is Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and then Virgo before we get into Libra, you know, this is like this is like our immediate environment. So we're picking up things on our immediate environment, which I wanted to kind of talk about with Gemini. Okay, the ways in which we have learned how to think, the ways in which we've learned how to communicate, the ways in which we've learned how to share ourselves, oftentimes comes from our childhood, oftentimes comes from our family dynamics, in our neighborhoods, in our environment, and the things that we were surrounded by. So I think as Jupiter, or what I'm starting to realize, especially when we talk about mercurial energy as being like this form of communication, a lot of things have been coming up about like, wow, where did I get this memory from? Or where did I get this ways of thought from? Like, where did this actually stem from? And I have to take it back to my roots. I have to take it back to some of the dynamics that I've experienced in my own personal life. And so if you do happen to be a Gemini South Node, or you have placements that happen to be in this Geminian energy, I would definitely ask you to kind of look back to your family and familial dynamic, even if you don't have Gemini in the 4th house. Looking into the ways in which you have communicated in the past, and the things that the knowledge that you have acquired. Where did you get that information from? Who told you that those things were what they actually were? So like really start looking at, and that's something that I've been doing personally myself, of like, okay, well, who told me that this was gold? Or who told, like, what was being projected? What was my immediate environment speaking to me about, or telling me about, even subconsciously, even if it wasn't like something that was verbally said, just something I picked up on as a child. And I think it's Astrochat Astrology. I was reading the article. It was a great ass article. I'm gonna have to put it in the link or in the description box. When I was looking into just learning more about like Geminian energy, and she put it into words so fucking well. I want to read it to y'all real quick, because hello, Lemire, progress Sun in Gemini and South Node in Gemini. That's what's up. I'm going to say Gemini South Node. I have to read it to y'all because it was just so good. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is so good to like learn about. Okay. So one of the things that stuck out here, hey, how you doing? And everybody else who's coming in and tuning in, whether you're here now or later. We oftentimes especially hear about like this, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I love being a North Node or South Node of Gemini and a North Node of Sagittarius. I think, personally, I might be a little biased, but it's a saucy, placement to have, because it, to me, is like the explorer, the wonder. But oftentimes, especially if we're talking about South Node energy, it can be so hard to break out of, because it is your comfort zone. It is the things that makes you feel comfortable. So Gemini is sitting here in a space where, yes, it's very intelligent again, but it's, like I said, picking up from its environment. So what naturally Gemini wants to speak about and talk about, maybe even write about and think about, it was what was happening in the environment. It might be hard to like speak out on things or break away from like said things that people have said in your family dynamic, or your friendship groups, or the places that you visited, like I said, in that immediate environment. So trying to switch that up can feel like soul wrenching, because you're like, well, this is what I've always known, whereas Sagittarius is the seeker, right? So let me go to what I read. It's Alice Sparkly Cat. Shout out to Alice Sparkly Cat. And I just typed in like Gemini South Node, and this came, one of the things that came up. It was on many articles, but for some reason I wanted to talk about this. Okay, so here was one of the fears of the Sagittarius North Node, because if we talk about the South Node, we have to talk about the North Node. So let me read this. It says, what Sagittarius hates most of all, and I can attest to this because I hate being told what to do, okay, is the feeling of being preached to. They hate being told what to do. They hate being told what they're made of. They despise anyone who stands at a high pulpit saying things that they really don't experience to the masses. So this is like somebody who was like, yeah, I've been there, I've done that. I've been on I've been on that level. I've seen the spaces. It's like, you've never stepped foot outside your house, sir. You ain't never been there and been that. What are you talking about? So you can see that definitely here with, the North Node in Gemini. It says, again, it isn't because Sagittarius North Node people aren't opposed to learning. They love learning. Rather, Sagittarius North Node hates being evangelized because they loved learning. They understand that being preached to is a poor way to learn. So, again, if we think about this, I'm going to continue reading because this is it was just a good ass article. Like, I've never heard or seen the Sagittarius North Node and the South Node. We hear all like the bubbly things, which is great, right? But if we're talking about evolutionary astrology, if we're talking about soul growth, these are the things that we want. Like, these are the things. And like I said, I could talk about my personal experience, yes, but like, it resonated with me so well because I was just like, yes, like, oh my God. But like I said, if you have somebody that's preaching to you, with this South Node and Gemini energy about something that they've never experienced, and you're just picking up on that, you're kind of like taking it all in. When you get on that uncomfortability of the Sagittarius North Node to something that you've never experienced or never been, you can get quite comfortable here in this Gemini South Node, right? You can feel like, okay, well, I never want to move. Never really want to leave this space because this is comfortable to me. Like, not knowing can sometimes feel comfortable than knowing. It's not to say that Gemini is not seeking the truth, but the ways it seeks the truth, like I said, is like what is going on around you. I've only seen this. That's like somebody living in a neighborhood. And I'm going to talk more about the Gemini South Node as well, too, because it's a part of me. And I definitely want to share as well, too. But, like, it's like somebody who's literally never been outside their neighborhood. I watch documentaries, for example, about people specifically in, like, the 80s. And it still happens to this day, but people in, like, the 80s, especially, like, during, like, before the Bloods and Crips was the Bloods and Crips, right? And they talked about how the Bloods and Crips used to live in like these sectioned neighborhoods. They never left these sections because a lot of times these things were territorial. Now, granted, I just want to say this. The Bloods and Crips wasn't always what America has painted the Bloods and Crips out to be. The Bloods and Crips actually started, I know this is kind of diverting a little bit, but I had to. It actually started because the police was threatening the neighborhoods and, harassing and killing folks in the neighborhood. So then this brotherhood or sisterhood started to form, and it was called, before it was the Bloods and Crips, I think it was called something else. Actually, Bloods and Crips stands for something longer. I just can't think of the name right now. But basically they were trying to protect their neighborhoods and things. So just want to put that out there when it comes to this energy here. Okay, I'm going to continue reading though. It says, Sagittarius North Node is also incredibly afraid of saying the wrong things precisely because they are afraid of inviting preachers into their life. They don't want nobody telling you nothing. And I remember when I was younger, I used to hear all the time, like, you can just never be wrong. You always got to get the last word. You can never just have somebody telling you wrong. Like, or you always feel like you know everything. That's what people used to tell me all the time. You always feel like you know everything, And so not often, like, well, I might do know a lot. But do we actually know everything? I do, but don't tell nobody though. Anyway. And they believe that when you say the wrong thing, that you somehow temporarily lose your rights until you're able to learn proper behavior. This is why Sagittarius North Node people often hide themselves in an intellectual niche, which I'll talk about especially with me in astrology, which, granted, this came organically. Don't want you to think that I just jumped into it, but it's interesting to understand, to know. It says, they hide themselves in an intellectual niche that no one quite understands, except for the people in the know. Again, they try to protect themselves by being legible to a few people as possible, okay? They rely on their mental maneuvers to buffer their relationships. My friend is a South Node in Sagittarius, and the debates between us, passionate as hell, like, bar for bar, like, it's Y'all probably met in a past life, and y'all probably was debating and all that kind of stuff in the past life too. Like, it's like, no, I know. Like, I understand. Like, I know. Like, yeah, it can get a mess. I can go on debates all day. Like, I used to have people call me a lawyer. They be like, you should be a lawyer the way you be arguing somebody down. Like, seriously. Or the way you be trying to, like, get that last word. And it'd be like, well, the wordsmith. This is the wordsmith gang. I mean, besides Virgo. But this is the mutable wordsmith gang here, with Virgo included. Okay. It also says Jupiter, who is Zeus. We're not going to talk about Zeus in Greek mythology because we know what came way before that. So we won't talk about Jupiter and Zeus. But it says, what Sagittarius North Node is afraid is not purely of simplicity, but pure confrontation with power. They have spent their lives making sure that they are undecipherable and incomprehensible to power. What Sagittarius North Node is afraid of is being in a condition where they might lose. And I was like, wow. That's one. Now, two, when it comes to the healing and growth of Sagittarius. So I want to talk a little bit about this. I'm not going to read this whole thing. Like I said, I'll definitely put the link on there so you can like read it and stuff. But it talks about, this is what stuck out to me the most. It talks about the issue of keeping secrets with this Sagittarius energy, or the South Node in Gemini, okay? It says one healing that kickstarts is the North Node people. North Node, that in words is orientation, which I didn't really get that particular thing about it, like orientation or whatever. Somebody wants to explain that to me in regards to healing. But it says the issue of keeping secrets, of shrouding yourself in riddles, of treating secrets as if it's not as sacred is not the secret keeping itself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with keeping secrets, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting to know someone, know what somebody wants you to say. But skills are necessary. Both skills are necessary for starting a conversation. Their listening skills and their knowledge creation skills. It says the issue, it says basically South Node, I'm all a jumble with words. Sagittarius North Node Gemini tends to care more about the arguments that they know they will never win, okay, than the ones where they're actually listened to. Arguments where they are forced to intellectualize a part of their lived experience so they can be put down by some pseudo intellectual or more emotionally activated than conversations with those who share their lived experience. And I was like, oh, it kind of stung. I'm not gonna lie, it kind of stung. I'm like, so what is basically this is trying to say is like, you'll literally go, it's like one of these things where you're just like asking yourself, like, accept me. Like, you know, accept me in this space. Like, understand where I'm coming from. Understand me. Get to know me. I've noticed this in my relationships. I've noticed this in my friendships. I've noticed this in my relationships to my family. Like, why don't you just get with people that, like, understand? Now, granted, this is not to say yes men, like having like a whole bunch of yes men around you with South Node Gemini. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is people that are like, yes, I understand where you're coming from. I also went through this particular experience, so I can understand what that feels like. Versus somebody who has never experienced a thing, never been through that kind of experience, and it's just like buffer. Like just, and you're trying to like argue somebody down or prove it through like this actual factual thing, or like relying on pseudo-intellectual or pseudo-science to prove that what you're saying is true, or prove that your lived experience is true. It's like fighting an uphill battle that you will never, ever win. Because of course they can't understand that. Of course they can't understand that experience. You see what I'm saying? It's a very interesting take. That's why I was like, oh my God, I have to read this. I had to just come on live to read this because it was just so rich. Another thing I wanted to talk about is they were talking about the clients. Now, I've had a couple of people who I've done readings with who have had South nodes in Gemini, and North node in Sagittarius, but not many. But I can understand it, like I said, from my own personal experience, what that has been like for me. So they talked about basically this client that they had, Alice Sparkly Cat is who I'm talking about in this article. It says, I had a client teach me the difference between being listened to and being understood is the difference between repetition and creating new knowledge. When you are only listened to, you rely on repetitive narratives. When you are understood, you create new knowledge with someone. Wow. You've been through that too? That's so crazy. Me too, but this was my experience in that. It creates a rapport. It also helps you heal. Because you talking to somebody who can understand where you're coming from. You feel me? So I just want to put that out there. It says orientation and reorientation does this for the Sagittarius North Node and South Node Gemini people. When they stop orienting themselves around loss and start orienting themselves around desire and get to know curiosity, they thrive. And oh goodness, it's so much to unpack here. It says they start creating new knowledge with those who understand instead of attempting to force those who will never understand to listen. Okay? That's why relationships matter so much to Sagittarius North Node and South Node and Gemini people. They thrive when they're able to choose their relationships and when they eagerly consent 100% to their relationships. Not forced relationships. You know, I seen, and I'm gonna get back to this, but I seen somebody, I think long time ago, I think it was on either Instagram or it was either on YouTube, I'm not really sure, or no, TikTok or Instagram. They said life started being a little bit differently for me when I started having relationships outside of my work. When they started, instead of having like these forced relationships, basically, and this could apply to anything. It doesn't just have to be like the workplace that you're in. But basically, they realized that when they were like forming and merging these relationships with people inside their work, it's because they were basically in a forced environment. Like some of these people, like I have to get to know because I work with them and I'm merging these relationships. Or even in school, we all go to school together. So, you know, we make these kind of like merged relationships. What does life look like outside of that? Like, have you went to a place or gone to a place or a space where you had to like merge and form new relationships? So example, if you're sitting in a cafe and you're reading a book, you're in a cafe reading a book and something like that, and everybody has their headphones, or some people have their headphones in, but some people don't have their headphones in, and you look across the room and there's somebody that you really, really want to talk to. Or even maybe there's an experience that you always wanted to go on to or always wanted to do, but you never allowed yourself to do it. But for some reason, this path is opening up for you to be able to do so, right? You taking yourself out of that uncomfortable zone of like being, like I said, forced into these relationships or forced into these mergers of opportunity relationship and just creating it on your own. This article also talks about like, you know, people who have been into school or go to school. For example, I could talk about myself, but in the beginning of the article, it talks about a little bit of how, you know, Gemini South Node starts off, especially when it comes to like social institutions and things, because Sagittarius or like Jupiterian energy can rule like institutions, higher education, higher learning, colleges, things like that. You start off with so much excitement to go to these spaces and go to these places, only then to understand at a deep level, I would even say the pseudoscience behind these institutions and things. And so that initial enthusiasm to come to learn, but then being like preached to, you know, about some type of education or some type of formed experience when the person probably never really lived it. They're just teaching from a book or teaching from a curriculum. it slowly starts to dwindle. So finding that, I would say, inner seeker, that inner self that wants to learn more, that wants to know more, but you taking the initiative to find that, to explore that, to experience that, instead of being so stuck on, again, the things that you have lost or the things that you have left behind, or the experiences from a environment that taught you to be the things that you are, an environment that taught you to speak in the ways that you speak or do the things that you do. It's going outside of that. And again, that can feel gravely uncomfortable in any South Node placement, but specifically for the South Node in Gemini. It says, when Sagittarius, North Node, and Gemini South Node people learn how to build relationships of integrity, they are able to figure out what honesty looks like for them. Honesty is not just about a stream of consciousness, and it's not about saying impactful things all the time, and it's not always about speech. Every Sagittarius, North Node, and South Node person has a different definition of honesty, but it's something that they are only capable to explore when they feel safe. That's why I say going back to these experiences with people that you can talk to about these shared experiences and not feeling like you have to force, relationships or make relationships work for people to understand where it is that you're coming from, how you're getting along with the information. Like, no, we're out of that now. You know what I mean? Y'all get it? Who's in the comments now? Let me know what y'all feel, what y'all think. It was something else. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention here because I didn't get to say it about secretive or being secretive here. There was another thing that was here. It was about like the relationship to family as well. Yeah. It was about relationships to family. Oh, one more thing with the family dynamic, and then I'll wrap this up a little bit. It says, I meet a lot of Gemini South Node people who were told that they had to keep secrets because of the family. And this is security issues with Gemini South Node is what it's entitled. Depending upon things not said. I meet a lot of Gemini South Node people who are very good at figuring out what other people want and what other people want to hear, and then just saying that just to get by. I meet a lot of Gemini South Node people who are frustrated and angry about having to say the thing that they think people want to hear instead of what they actually think. Okay? Because it's like, is this going to be, am I able? And I know some of y'all probably will see this video and be like, well, I'm a Gemini South Node. I say what I want to say. But what did it take to get you there, to that space? Because at a young age, you probably was unruly with that mouth. You probably was more unruly with the things that you had to say and the things that you felt. But at some point in time, there was a break in that. There could have been a place in space where you felt like, okay, well, if I say this thing, it might set this person off. Or if I say this thing in this environment or situation, it might not be the right thing to say, And so, again, you'll kind of recede a little bit because you're like, oh, it's not the right thing that I gotta say, so maybe I just shouldn't say it at all. Like, last time I said it, I blew up the spot. So should I go off and say these things? I'm not really sure. Okay. It says, Gemini South Node people are a cryptic bunch. They're used to navigating spaces where their gender identity, their chronic illness, or their life experience does not exist. It takes a lot of mental maneuvering to exist when you feel, and in some ways, that your existence is a lie. I remember when I had I promise y'all I'm gonna finish this, but I remember when I had my first spiritual awakening after leaving college. I remember having my first spiritual awakening after leaving college, and I felt like I was going fucking insane. I felt like I was going crazy. Mind you, Gemini had just, I think Jupiter was in Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. But in Vedic astrology, Jupiter was in Gemini at the time. I felt like I was going insane because I'm like, none of this shit is real. Everything that we've been taught was a lie. Like, this was before my Saturn return. Like, I really had a break. It was a point to where I felt like I was detaching from the earth. I felt like I was detaching from the world because everything that I realized, I'm like, I didn't spend all my time going to this place. Granted, I appreciate the experiences that I had because I wouldn't know what I know now. But I felt mentally shot. Like, yeah, it was a lot. It was just mentally a lot, I feel like, and spiritually a lot too. But it says the family secrets of Gemini South Node cannot be overstated enough. Sure. Oh, I think I said they're used to navigating spaces. Oh, you end up fictionalizing, cosplaying yourself, and closing yourself off until you really only talk to like 3 people on the internet, is what it said. Then it talks about the family secrets of Gemini South Node cannot be overstated enough. Sure, all Gemini South Node people have family secrets, but it is common enough to think, it's a common enough thing that I feel I need to call attention to it. If you are a Gemini and South Node person who had to anticipate the needs of one or more parents by keeping secrets from them, you are not alone, okay? Gemini South Node people learn that secretiveness is temporary security. They learn how to gloss over things and how to keep things on the back burner and how to spin a true emotions so it lands differently based on who they are speaking to. The reason that they do this is not because they're inherently dishonest, it's because they are afraid that confrontation will break a relationship. A lot of times what you'll see is Gemini South Node can be very surface-based. It likes to stay above the surface. It intellectualizes things even above the surface, right? So when it starts getting deep, it's like, ooh. It's constantly checking its environments. It's constantly checking its surroundings to say, ooh, can I say this? Did I experience that? Like, it really do be with Gemini and South Node people. And so the last thing that I want to quote from this particular article, it says, Gemini South people are learning that they cannot control someone's reactions. They are learning that they cannot avoid conflict by minimizing themselves in a relationship. They are learned that real relationships involve them, the real them, and not ideas of themselves that are carefully crafted in service of another person. With Gemini energy here, okay? So, and also being Gemini, Jupiter, this generation is either Jupiter Virgo, sometimes Jupiter Virgo, and sometimes Jupiter Libra, depending on where it is. It could be a different Jupiter, but usually in that energy. So really having to, I guess, get over the loophole or get over the hump of people pleasing, really, saying the right things at the right time. The thing about North Node and Sagittarius is just going to say it. Gemini is going to say it too, but it's not going to look to say the right thing at the right time. It's going to just say whatever and feel comfortable with saying whatever. So I would just say, just to kind of wrap this all up, when it comes to having the South Node, or just reading this article, but then also my own personal experiences of my own South Node and Gemini energy, is like, really, one, get around people in relationships and friendships, communicating your real thoughts, your real ideas, your real needs, because what it's going to do is it's going to end up pulling in the people that need to be there and want to listen and want to learn, and also you being able to learn from the other person. And it's going to repel. It's going to continue to repel the people that are not there for that maybe want to stay in the surface. It's going to release that maybe internal resentment of not saying the things in which you want to say and probably need to say in that space and environment. Finding real boundaries in not your, I don't know why somebody said your intellectual property, not your intellectual property, but just where you're at mentally, physically, and even emotionally. Because, intellectualizing your emotions is different from actually feeling into your emotions, So, yeah, that's what I feel about. That's just one of the things that came up, like I said, especially as we're in Gemini season and we're moving through this Geminian energy and you know, Jupiter being in Gemini once again after not being in Gemini for a very long time. You know, just really stepping back into this idea of, okay, well, what does it look like for me to like express myself, but also what does it also look like for me to be around people that I can like learn from, you know, people that understand me, people that really have this sense of, I don't know, I would say that just are in a better space, are formed in a better space of where I'm able to like learn and be the fullest version of myself with no judgment, or feeling like I have to hold myself back, being in that safe space where I'm able to share my knowledge with others, you know. And I know a lot of people talk about, like I said, the fire air of not having like these feelings or emotions, which fire is passionate as hell. And air is definitely an expression of emotions. They just feel it differently. They intellectualize it before they feel into their emotions and things like that. So yeah, I want y'all to sit with that. Let me know in the comments what you think. Even if you don't have a Gemini South Node, that's fine. You don't have to have a Gemini South Node to be experiencing or to understand this energy. If you're just a lover of astrology, this video is definitely for you. Or if you have a North Node in Sagittarius, this is also for you as well. And just want to learn, you know. Like I said, I will be talking more about evolutionary astrology, but I just wanted to kind of kick it off with a Gemini South Node, especially since we are in Gemini season. So you already know what it is. It's a rainy storm, checking in, checking out without a doubt. I will see y'all on the next video. This is gonna actually premiere live today, but it will drop actually on Thursday. And then what I'll do is, as we're finishing up the planetary through the houses series each week, I'll talk about, I guess as we're in Gemini season, right? Or in the seasons, we'll talk about something that has to do with evolutionary astrology. We'll have a little chit chat about evolutionary astrology. I am going to be going to just posting probably like twice a week, like minimum twice a week. If I do hop on for other things, I will, but just minimum twice a week. Instead of posting Monday through Wednesday or Monday through Thursday, I'll just only be posting Tuesdays and Thursdays with like reels, community updates in the community tab on my Substack. If you haven't subscribed already to my email list, you can definitely subscribe on my email list below to stay updated. And other than that, like I said, I already know what it is. It's a rainy storm, checking in, checking out without a doubt. Deuces.